We are back on Fight News now, and we're moving over to a topic I can talk about for hours, weight cutting. And California, which I think has been one of the most progressive, maybe the most progressive of all the major commissions out there, taking a big step forward, and they are instituting a new policy that is going to allow fighters to weigh in earlier. This is very much like what the Kansas Commission is doing, as well as taking hydration tests for fighters, and they are not going to be shy about telling a fighter, listen, you are not properly hydrated, you're not fighting, or even moving a guy up a weight class for his next fight. These are major changes that are going to probably have the initial backlash from a lot of fighters, but I think that between what One Championship is doing, what Kansas is doing, what California is doing, we are seeing a slow but pretty radical shift in the whole culture of weight cutting.
What I do like is the fact that they're looking at things and they're trying to improve. Just like, you know, we've seen how the sport slowly progressed. You know, we think of mixed martial arts as going back to that first UFC. Well, it really wasn't essentially the first UFC because it was still, you know, style versus style. That had to develop into the sport of mixed martial arts, and then they had to start going through the science and try to figure out what works best. How can we keep our athletes the safest? And there's been no time like the present where the sport and everybody involved wants what's best for the fighters. And I think this is a step in the right direction, but we were talking about the fact that this is a science experiment that will probably be ongoing. You need all the input from all the athletes and everybody involved in the sport, as well as medical professionals. And again, it's going to be a work in progress.
There's going to be all manner of things. There's the issue of weight cutting is bad when done to the extent that a lot of people do it. That's a real issue. And then what you do about it is a whole other thing. And in most cases, unless you're going to look and somebody's going to really lay it out, the research that they've done, who they've brought in, how they've looked at it, not only in the science. So the science says medically you can only do this. The implementation, the systemic implementation of how things are done. We live in a complex society. You used to farm, you'd cut it down, you'd trade it with me for milk. Now we live in the most complicated society in human history. And people now try to tweak things, and when they do, they don't think about the 27 bad effects by trying to make something better. And that is a very, very common thing in society, and there's going to be 27 bad ones from this one. Doesn't mean don't try, but you can't just jump and make changes. Things dramatically change. ONE FC is laying it out and saying, here's what has to be done, and here's the 27 steps that we're taking to make sure that'll happen. Although that is going to be really difficult for fighters and their coaches and the world that they live in, it's better than saying, this is how you have to be, medical hydration-wise, etc. Fighters are like,
get there.
I make $8,000. I don't have a dietitian or a doctor to do any of these things. I cut weight in high school when I wrestled. Now I'm cutting weight. All these guys will be showing up off weight. It's dangerous the way they cut weight, but the reason it is done that way is people looking to sacrifice a little bit of their comfort, later probably sacrifice some of their health, to gain an advantage. You put new systems in place, that'll still be the goal, and people will still figure out how to exploit it.
I look at this just laying everything out on the table. Essentially what fighters are being told here is just, listen, you're just going to weigh in earlier, and you're going to be given that many more hours now to get ready for your fight. So all this is doing is essentially you're moving your weight cut up. It's not necessarily going to curb everything, though the hydration test.
That's the big one.
Very much.
That's the big one.
I mean, that's a major one, and that's where you can really get into the science. But the actual moving up of the weigh-ins, I think that's a welcome change where guys are just going to have that much more time to replenish their bodies.
That's not even that big a change because many places already do it, and lots of places, and every fighter knows this. Every fighter who's fought 6 or 8 or 10 or 30 times, they'll call, you know, where's the sauna, what do we got to do, etc. Oh, what times are weigh-ins? And when your coach says, weigh-ins are at noon, you're just so excited because that means you got 36 hours to replenish. Or weigh-ins are at 2. You're like, awesome. It's when weigh-ins are at 6 or 7, you have less time to replenish before the fight. So it's not all that uncommon. The real challenge is, medically, doctors have said to every fighter in every commission for a long time, you cannot dehydrate more than 10% of your body weight. So if I fight at 135 pounds, 10% of where I was, so I was at 150, I can dehydrate 15 pounds. So that means a 150-pound man can dehydrate to 135. I don't know, I'm 152-ish. I'm not sure. I make $8 grand to fight. I don't know. I don't have a dietitian. All of them. almost every fighter cuts more than 10%. So immediately everybody's going to fail that hydration test. And what are they going to do? Every single fight is at a weight up. I mean, that's kind of what ONE FC is doing. But I don't know. New systems, new complexities are not easy to implement.
But what is the strategy? Well, the goal is to make things safer for everybody. So what needs to be done to ensure that it's a level playing field and the athletes are taken care of?
That's the big billion-dollar question, because those things are not the same. Just like I said at the beginning, we know it needs to be changed. The answer is not, I don't know, just try some shit. It'll probably change it. We got to protect the fighters, so do these things. It just doesn't work that way. It's super complicated. So we have looked at it, and over many years of studying fighting, we and thousands of others agree it is not safe. But nobody has the expertise to change the system. They're going to try. Here's some attempts. But you really want to change it, you bring in not only doctors and hydration experts, but you bring in trainers, you bring in systemic implementation people. It's a massive undertaking to get it right.
So it's going to be a long process.
So, yeah, and if you just do it instinctively, you'll get it wrong. Better than not trying, for sure. Not saying don't do it, you got to protect the health, but they're going to get it wrong because it's natural to get things wrong unless you really detail and study and implement and try and try and it's wrong and try again and it's wrong. If they're dedicated to doing that and making it better 5 years from now, this is a great step. If they're hoping this cures it, it won't.
Well, the first, possible major card that this could impact is the UFC is talking about running April 23rd in Anaheim, California. With Madison Square Garden out, that's probably where that show ends up. And let's just theoretically throw out the scenario that it is Daniel Cormier and John Jones. And Daniel Cormier, who does have quite a cut down to 205 pounds the day before, it's just, you're completely dehydrated. We cannot allow this title fight to take place. What is the public's reaction going to be? Even though today we can look at, listen, I'm all in favor of this myself personally, but what is the average fan who's spent a ton of money, traveled to Anaheim, has great seats, and the day before a title fight is taken off? These are the kinds of growing pains I think are going to be very common as we get to a place where the culture changes, where a guy who is 40 pounds above his weight class during camp realizes I can't be fighting at that weight class any longer.
Luckily, but the UFC, they're always prepared. And if Daniel Cormier is pulled out, it's like, guess what? We have Anthony Johnson ready to go. It's going to be Anthony Johnson versus John Jones for the interim championship.
On what notice?
Sure.
The day before?
It'll be I'm sure it'll be talked.
Johnson's going to get that's the same problem.
You know what's better than like having medical attention to the problem is having a bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
Our friend Ryan Hall gave us that analogy, and we use it a lot. And so we can go, oh my God, we got to replace the fight. Or the UFC can go, holy crap, there's a whole bunch of new things in place. We will assign professionals to keep this. Oh, you're 2 days out. You're actually 1% over. You got to do it. And it'll be part of their contract. Now, if that's the case, now what happened is what we're seeing ONE FC go, it's got to be this, so we'll help you get there. In this case, we're saying the commission go, it's got to be this. The UFC might go, oh my God, if it's got to be that, we're the ones who hurt. If our fans are affected, if our consumers are affected, it affects us. So we have to implement these things to do it. So it might actually work out.
I think this is going to be a fascinating topic throughout this entire year and how it's implemented. It's very interesting to watch. We will now sign off, and we are going to be back on Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour pre-fight show, looking at the UFC Fight Night card, headlined by Johnny Hendricks and Stephen Thompson, and then the prelims will be airing Saturday night here in Canada on Fight Network with 4 fights, including the return of Noad Lahat, as well as KJ Noons taking on Josh Burkman.